Clare FM's In the Garden with Clonroad Garden Centre, Clonroad Business Park in the heart of Ennis. Whether you're a seasoned gardener or just starting out, our friendly staff are here to help your garden grow. Open 7 days a week, Monday to Sunday.
And I am joined as ever by Judy Beck from Clonroad Garden Centre. Judy, good morning to you.
Good morning, Alan, and another lovely day outside today.
It is indeed not just a lovely day, but it strikes me as an ideal gardening day. I'm sure there's plenty of people who took the opportunity over the weekend and might be able to continue that the way things are going. You are talking this week about lawns.
Yes.
I suppose we're entering that time of year where the likes of myself have to, as much as we don't want to, drag the lawnmower out and tackle them again.
That's it, absolutely. And the good weather has brought lots of gardeners into the garden centre over the weekend. And one of the big things that we were being asked about was lawns. So it is that time of year when people are looking at they're out in their gardens and, I have to do something about my lawn. And the probably biggest problem that we have in this country is moss on the lawns. Moss, of course, is caused by damp conditions, shady conditions, and there's not many lawns around without a bit of moss, and some with an awful lot of moss by what our customers are saying. So with the lawn care, I suppose now it is time to start thinking about cutting your lawn, as you were saying. And from now on for the summer, we'll be starting maybe once every 2 weeks and going into once a week. And that will definitely help with keeping the weeds and the moss down. And of course, a regular lawn mowing, it makes your lawn stronger, which will help to control those weeds and moss as well.
Okay, and just to remind people, it is 086 1800 964 for your gardening questions. I'll put those to Judy a little later on. But what else, Judy, do people need to be aware of in terms of tackling their lawns?
So compacted ground, which means ground that's been walked on, that prevents the grass from growing and can lead to bare patches in your lawn over the summer and very muddy lawns in the winter. So to prevent that compaction or to help relieve the compaction, you can aerate your soil by using a garden fork. There is a particular tool you can get for it, but most people won't. You don't have to buy that. You can use a fork and go along your lawn every 6 inches or so, put your fork into the lawn, lift up the soil and let the air into it. If you have a very wet, heavy soil, you can brush sharp sand or fine horticultural grit into the soil, and that will help improve the drainage and also helps to get rid of moss. But of course, what most people use to get rid of moss, there's two main ways. You can use a product either called a weed feed and moss killer, or else you can use a product, the Clonroad, which is based on a bacteria. And to go through the first one, the weed feed and moss killer, that's a 3-in-1. It does contain a chemical. Contains a weed killer and it contains sulphate of iron, and the sulphate of iron turns your moss black. The moss then needs to be raked out of the lawn, or you can let it die away, though it's a bit unsightly. And then as it dies away, you can reseed your lawn. The Mobacter works on a different type of science. It works on a bacteria. You spread the Mobacter over your lawn. It's no chemicals, so it's safe if you've kids or pets. They don't need to be kept off the lawn. And this is becoming very popular now to use it, as it's a more organic way of controlling the moss. So you put out the Mobacter on the lawn and it gradually dissolves the moss. And as the moss dissolves, then it feeds your lawn. So it not just acts as getting rid of the moss, it's also a feed for your lawn. So two different methods of using it, both very popular. And it's up to people which they would prefer to use themselves, of course. You can then also get just a pure weed killer if you don't want the weeds in your lawn. It is nice to maybe leave the dandelions for those bees coming out. There's not a lot for them at this time of year, but I know that some people just they want to try and get the Augusta golf looking lawn, which
easier said than done.
Very much easier said than done, but I suppose we all have aspirations. So You can always try, but you can get a pure weed killer if you want to get rid of the daisies and daisies and dandelions.
Okay, what about people, Judy, in their garden and the brown areas that they just can't seem to get rid of? What is causing that, and how can they tackle it?
So brown areas would usually be caused by drought, and it's usually in areas of the lawn maybe that are under overhanging trees. The other reason it can be caused is by an over application of fertiliser. So less is more really when it comes to fertilisers, and you say, oh my gosh, my lawn is terrible, and you'll just add a little bit extra on, which sometimes is counterproductive. So and it can cause brown areas in the lawn. Giving it a good watering does help a lot, and then overseeding it with new lawn seed. And what kind of lawn seed is people are asking? What's all the difference with all these different lawn seeds? Now, if you have, high traffic on your lawn, the kids are playing football, you should go for a pretty hardy lawn seed. If you have dogs out on the lawn a lot, there is an extra tough lawn seed. If it's like a front lawn that's not walked on a lot and you like that very fine kind of a lawn, you can get an extra fine lawn seed, but generally for family lawns we would recommend what we call number 2 lawn seed, and that is for the kids playing football, and it'll stand up to drought, it'll stand up to a good bit of rain, which we all are used to. So using the right lawn seed is important when you are reseeding your lawn.
Okay, another point you want, or another thing you want to talk about in terms of problems, is leather jackets on new lawns. And you know what I'm going to ask you. Mm-hmm. What does that actually mean? Because obviously I'm just picturing a bunch of leather jackets. A load of bikers have pulled up to your garden and they've thrown their leather jackets on your lawn. What exactly is a leather jacket in gardening terms, though?
So, a leather jacket is the larvae of the daddy longlegs. So it's a larvae that lives in the lawn, and now it's normally a problem with new lawns. So it could be if you've built a new house and you're turning the field into a lawn, then these larvae tend to be in the old meadow, and it's always the worst in the first year, though the second year can be pretty bad as well. And it's not just new lawns that get leather jackets. There's no chemical control for them. They do eat the roots of the grass. There is what we call a nematode. A nematode is a natural occurring little living creature that basically will eat the leather jackets and get rid of them. But there's no chemical control, and it does tend to improve as the years go on, and they're not very common in older lawns.
Okay, that answers my question anyway. I think I prefer actual leather jackets to the sound of larvae from daddy longlegs.
Yeah, I know.
Any final points you want to make on lawns before we get on to the jobs you've drawn up for our listeners?
So I suppose the main thing is with if you're starting to mow your lawn, remember to have it up on a fairly high setting. So you don't want to go too low at this time of year. Have it fairly high, and then slowly lower your lawn more onto the as we dry out. And if you cut it too low, you'll get big brown patches, and just looks a little bit unsightly. It will recover. It's not the end of the world if you go too low, but better to start it high, and then you can slowly lower it over the next month or two.
Okay, before we get to the jobs for the week, actually, I wanted to ask you about a man who's, maybe it's no surprise he's really gotten into gardening, given his entire career involved strutting about on grass. But David Beckham. You would think he'd be busy enough, Judy, with being a big investor in Inter Miami over in MLS, and obviously he has loads of other things going on, things generating money in his life. But he's a keen gardener. Not only that, at the world famous Chelsea Flower Show, he's going to be hosting a garden at it with Alan Titchmarsh as part of a project with the King's Foundation. I don't know, were you aware of David Beckham's love for gardening, or have you seen any of his handiwork? Is he any good at it?
He is actually one of the... So I don't follow a lot of people on social media, but I would follow him a little bit because he has a beautiful garden now. I'd say he doesn't do all the work himself, but...
come on now. Are you telling me a man who's practically a billionaire is not doing all the hard work himself?
Well, maybe Victoria gives him a hand.
Yeah, right.
But he has a beautiful garden. It is well worth following him, and he has hens, he has bees, and he's quite well known for his gardening, actually. He does seem to have green fingers. And there's another very famous Munster sportsman who's big into gardening too, Peter O'Mahony. I follow him on social media as well, and he loves his lawn. So if you do like lawns, he might be one that it would be worth following.
And he has plenty of time now. Like David Beckham, he's retired, so he can tackle his garden. Well, good to know that. I wonder, David and Peter, I'm sure you're listening. So Judy has some jobs drawn up for the week ahead. You can get stuck to them. And David, if you're not doing it, your many helpers on your country estate can do this. So what jobs have you drawn up for our listeners and for David and Peter for the coming week?
I forgot to say one thing actually, just when we were going through that. I forgot to say just to people, if they are doing their lawns, just to be careful using their strimmers, because the hedgehogs and the frogs, just to keep it in mind. And there's an awful lot of injuries caused to hedgehogs at this time of year, and when people start taking out their strimmers. But to go on to the jobs for the week, ericaceous shrubs, that's the rhododendrons, azaleas, camellias, pieris. They're all plants that like boggy soil. They're like a lime-free compost. We call them ericaceous. And now is the time to feed them with an ericaceous fertiliser. Also, a good time now if you're looking to plant up climbers around your walls, such as clematis and honeysuckle, lots of different types of climbers and shrubs. Now is a really good time to buy them and plant them in the spring, and lots of new ones coming into the garden centre over the next few weeks. And a favourite one, especially with the kids, is planting strawberry plants and putting them in hanging baskets to keep them away from the slugs. And strawberry plants grow really well in hanging baskets. And strawberry plants beginning to come now into the garden centre too.
Yeah, and I think I nearly might start growing strawberries myself as well, Judy, given how little time the ones you buy in the supermarket seem to last. So maybe if you grow them yourself, they'll last a bit longer.
And they taste so much better.
Like everything else, if you grow it yourself. Right, let's get to the listeners' questions. 086 1800 964 is the number for your gardening question. And Brian is first up. He says, good morning. We planted a laurel hedge a year ago, and while some has progressed and grown slightly, a lot of it has gone yellow and it is not thriving. I guess Brian is wondering, why is that?
I would say it could be a couple of reasons. Most likely is that possibly the soil is very wet, and laurel hedging hates wet soil, so that could be causing it to go yellow and get black spots as well. If it's hard now once it's planted to drain the soil, but there are other hedges that do better in wet soil than that. Now, the other reason it could be in parts of the soil could be very stony and the roots have nowhere to go. So if he dug down a little bit and he comes across a lot of rocks, if he's on rocky soil, the laurel hedging is probably not thriving because the soil is just too poor in certain areas. Or, if there's one or two that are just doing really poor under those particular plants, there could be a big rock that's just preventing the roots from going anywhere.
Okay, we'll move on. And a question here. It's quite apt given what you were talking about a while ago. A listener saying, hi Alan and Judy, what do I do if I find a hedgehog in my garden? Well, I guess don't use a strimmer around it would be the first bit of advice from Judy. Yeah,
absolutely. And they'll be coming out of hibernation now. So well, we do have a hedgehog rescue in Clare, and the food, they say never give hedgehogs milk for a start. I think it's dog food actually is what they will eat. But I'd say leave well alone, and dogs can tend to go after hedgehogs, so try and not let your dog near the hedgehog because they can cause a lot of damage to them. But I would love to have a hedgehog in my garden, so I think that person's very lucky.
Yeah, just be careful around them, as Judy says. They've just woken up from long hibernation, so they tend to be a little prickly. So just
like we all are.
approach with caution. Ger in Shannon is asking, what fertiliser would one use on a lawn?
So it depends on if you want just pure fertiliser. If your lawn's in pretty good condition, otherwise you don't have a lot of moss and you don't have a lot of weeds, you can just get a pure lawn feed. And actually, you can get a particular lawn feed, but you can actually use fish blood and bone as well, is like a really good fertiliser for lawns. And you can buy that. I know it doesn't sound very nice.
I know. I'm trying not to think of that when I'm having my lunch later.
It's actually really good for lawns. So if you have that already in the shed, you could use that. But you can buy liquid fertilisers for lawns. You can buy granules as well, and you can buy child safe granules that are non-chemical based. So again, if you have kids and pets on the lawn, you can get products that you can use for feeding the lawn. But lots of different products for lawn feeding in the garden centres. So a really good time. And if he wants to come in and see me, I can show him all his options.
She's very helpful, so do that. Head down to Clonroad Garden Centre. A last one for this morning, Judy, is from Mary Gibson from Cross Tidy Towns. Good morning to you, Mary. Mary says, I'm thinking about sowing wildflowers for our Tidy Towns project. Is there some that come back every year and do well in, I presume that's a wild location, I think is what she's saying here? Or maybe it's a wide location. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay, so there is lots of different options when it comes to the wildflower seeds. The most important thing when you're doing the wildflowers is to make sure it's clear. So you can't put wildflower seed down on grass. And some people do make that mistake. They just want to throw it out on straight onto grass. You can't do that. You need to have clear soil. It needs to be bare soil. It doesn't need to be good quality soil, but it does need to be clear of weeds and grass. So you can get perennial wildflowers that do come back every year. You just cut them once a year in September, take away all the cuttings, and by then the seed should have dropped and they'll come back up next year. You may need to add a little bit extra every year because you will find that some species come back stronger than others and will take over the patch. So you can supplement that by adding in extra. But there are perennial ones that you can use, yes.
Okay, brilliant stuff. Thank you for all your questions. A bit disappointed Dave Beckham and Peter O'Mahony didn't send in a gardening question. But
maybe next week.
Maybe next week. Until then, until we hear from them, Judy, thanks as ever. Thank you very much for being with us. Judy Beck there from Clonroad Garden Centre.